Dobre večer. Tutaj William. Witajcie na sotygodniowym podsumowaniu polskich i irlandzkich wiadomości ze mną, William Murphy. The main headlines this week have included: the High Court further delays the granting of leave for the constitutional challenge being mounted by Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters against the COVID-19 lockdown laws, as Gardaí warn of an enforcement crackdown ahead of and during the bank holiday weekend. Donald Tusk calls for a boycott if Poland's presidential vote proceeds by post on May 10th, as opinion polls predict a landslide win for Andrzej Duda. And a further easing of the COVID-19 restrictions is announced in Poland. On Tuesday, the High Court in Dublin saw the application to take judicial review proceedings being taken by the journalists Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters against the new COVID-19 laws and regulations issued under the 1947 Health Act to enforce the draconian crackdown on civil liberties come up for mention. About 40 supporters of the applicants were prevented by a large force of Gardaí from entering the courtroom or court building, and they were filmed outside while they didn't comply with the social distancing requirements which form part of the very lockdown that's being challenged. The state is opposing even the granting of leave to take the proceedings, despite the substantive nature of the constitutional arguments being made being obvious. John Waters said that the case was one of the most important in our history, and repeated his concerns over any delay in a full hearing of the action. Gemma O'Doherty told the court that the people of Ireland are under mass house arrest, and said that the lockdown is endangering the health of the Irish people. She said that the court should already have granted them leave for judicial review. The case will come up again in the High Court next Tuesday for the actual hearing of the application. Meanwhile, the expectation is that the current lockdown will be extended for a further 2 weeks at least, with at best some very minor tweaks. Political voices, including to his credit the new Labour Party leader Alan Kelly, have started to question the lack of democratic oversight of the so-called NEFIT committee, comprising top health officials, a committee to which, you could argue, the cabinet appears to have delegated the running of the country. My own concerns about what's currently happening have only increased over the past week. If you think of all the things that are dangerous for a free society, an official media just reporting the official truth, constant indoctrination via on-screen messages on TV and online, and supermarket public address systems, and the vicious online condemnation of anyone who dares to question the justification for putting the nation effectively under mass house arrest, let alone who exercises their constitutional right to challenge the laws. The consequences of what's happening, and not just economically, will last for long after the current situation abates. Whatever minimal easing of the restrictions does come, I hope at least they involve an end to the unfair directive to over 70s to remain indoors and banished in the public space, which many such citizens have been falsely led to believe is a legal requirement, which it isn't, and that there is some relaxation in the number of mourners allowed at funerals. Let's not make COVID-19 an excuse for further reinforcement of ageism. Well, sorry, I guess we already have done that. It's also really concerning how the government is risking the excellent relationship between An Garda Síochána and the general public by using them to enforce a draconian crackdown on civil liberties, which very many people, albeit not a majority, but a significant and remarkable number nonetheless, given the wall-to-wall dissemination of official propaganda, simply don't agree with, or view as disproportionate to the risk we face. Of course, the coming long bank holiday weekend has become a particular target for both our official police, who've announced the launch of Operation Connacht to enforce the draconian restrictions, and what we might term the unofficial COVID police, such as zealous citizens and local authorities, ever vigilant against the heaven forbid arrival in their area of fellow human beings. In my native Wexford, the county council are using drones to look for an increase in visitors to locations such as caravan parks and holiday homes in advance of the bank holiday weekend. They say they'll pass on any so-called evidence to the Gardaí for enforcement under the COVID-19 regulations. It simply beggars belief, really. The Green Party, meanwhile, has outlined its price for entering a coalition government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, including a demand for a no less than 7% per annum reduction in carbon emissions. The two larger parties have responded, offering various further stops in the direction of the climate change agenda, and to negotiate further. The Greens have responded relatively positively to the letter they received from leaders of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and plan to study it further. I wonder whether, once the scale of the financial and wider economic consequences becomes fully apparent, if the climate change agenda will have quite the same resonance as before. There's also been speculation about a potential reorganisation of government departments. Among other changes, it's been reported that Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin wants to see a separate government department created responsible for higher education and research. One existing department, which, especially given the neglect of this area, uniquely among all other public services, that deserves once again to have a dedicated full member of the cabinet assigned to it, rather than a Minister of State attending cabinet, is defence. Surely one of the most fundamental priorities for any state. Turning to news from Poland. On Wednesday, the government confirmed it would proceed with plans for a further relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions, although they still remain egregious, and the relaxations are from a starting point of some of the toughest restrictions in any European country. From the beginning of next week, the second stage of relaxation will commence, which will include the full or partial reopening of nurseries and preschools, all retail outlets and shopping centres, not just ones deemed essential, hotels and cultural institutions. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said that the loosening of restrictions is due to the need to restart the economy, but warned that the government will act carefully and flexibly. Sometimes we will loosen restrictions. Sometimes we may have to take a step back. That is the nature of this virus. In just one of the many indicators of the severity of the economic contraction caused by the COVID-19 crisis, Poland's Central Statistical Office reported that the number of guests staying at the country's hotels fell by 65% in March, compared to the same month last year. Hotels are being allowed to reopen under the second phase of the easing of restrictions. Dates have not yet been announced for when the third and fourth stages will be implemented. The controversy over the plan to hold the presidential election by all postal ballot at some time in May, as there have been indications even from Prawo i Sprawiedliwość that the date may be moved, continues. On Tuesday, the president of the European People's Party and former Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called for a boycott of the all-postal ballot if it goes ahead on May 10th. In a video message posted on Twitter on Tuesday, Tusk said that basic human decency should stop Poles from voting in the election, and that he would not cast his own vote, although he did say that he thought an alternative election plan that was what he termed safe and fundamentally fair could be implemented. Ballot papers are controversially already being printed, although the passage of the necessary legislation to enable it to take place looks to be in doubt, and the outgoing Human Rights Commissioner has launched a legal challenge. The opposition's desire for a delay to the constitutionally mandated timeframe for the election of a new president may, of course, well have something to do with the opinion polls, the latest of which shows incumbent Andrzej Duda with a wide lead, enough for an outright victory in the first round. Of course, all that's entirely hypothetical at this stage, and the same polls show a large majority against the election going ahead. As of Wednesday, the total number of COVID-19 cases reported in Poland stood at over 12,400, with over 600 deaths being attributed to the virus. The current crisis, both economic and social, hasn't caused the European institutions to let up in their ongoing campaign against the Polish judicial reforms. On Wednesday, the European Commission Vice President, Věra Jourová, announced the commencement of yet more infringement proceedings against Poland over the disciplinary measures put in place for judges in February, in what the government said was a move designed to prevent chaos in the country's judicial system. The Commissioner said that member states may reform their justice system, but they must do so without violating EU treaties, something which the Polish government is of course adamant it's not doing. The Roman Catholic Church in Poland has announced that the beatification ceremony of the legendary Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, which was due to take place in Warszawa on June 7th, has been postponed to a future date, which is still to be determined. truly one of the greats of Polish history. Tavshescu na Chenchijin. Dobranoc.